Welcome back. I saw a sign on the wall of a vintage motor garage the other day which said, "He who dies with the most toys wins." And I guess it's true that if you own anything other than what you need for the basic essentials such as transport to work and back, it really represents a toy. And one of the most popular types of toys, I guess, in the world amongst grown men are vintage motor cars. Not only do they have the great appeal of harking back to a bygone era, but also they tend to grow in value as the years go by, so they become an excellent investment. And of course that would be one of the most desirable qualities of any toy, the fact that it would grow in value. Old Tilly, which I've owned for the last couple of years, and I have quite a few adventures driving around the country lanes. I have reason to believe that she's the oldest continuously registered motor car in Queensland, and I just registered her for the 62nd consecutive year. And she runs like a dream. She hasn't been restored. She's a dear old motor car. And there are some marks which over the years have really established themselves as the ones that everybody thinks about when they think about vintage motor cars. One of them is Jaguar, and the other one is MG. Now MG started production of their cars in the late 1920s, got into full swing around about 1935 or 1936, and immediately after the end of the Second World War produced a motor car which was based on pre-war technology, quite squarely on pre-war technology, and which became famous throughout the world as the MG TC. Now the TC was succeeded by the TD and then the TF, but the TC was the square-rigged English sports car which really showed the world what they represent as far as motoring pleasure and fun is concerned. We were lucky enough to be able to borrow an absolutely immaculate MGTC from Terry Gilltrap of Gilltraps at Southport on the Gold Coast a couple of weeks ago. We showed you a glimpse of it last week. Let's have a look at what the TC represented as far as motoring was concerned in 1947 when it was built, and in 1989 when we had another look at it. The TC was the car that more than any other pioneered the great export boom that turned Abingdon into the biggest sports car factory in the world. It emerged as a slightly modernised version of the TB, of which 379 were built in 1939 before war was declared. Once the war was over, the priority was to make as many cars as possible. The demand was such that anything sold, and it was prudent to concentrate on just one model rather than to become involved in the complications of producing several. To save time designing a more modern version of their bestseller, the Midget, Abingdon launched straight into producing the TC. Now the TC was powered by an engine which was developed for a 10 horsepower Morris saloon. The engine was codenamed the XPAG. It's a 4-cylinder water-cooled inline with a bore of 66.5mm and a stroke of 90mm, giving a displacement of 1250 cc's. Now, one of the most interesting things about the MG range was the fact that that engine was capable of absorbing a huge amount of tuning. They could be bored out to about 1600 cc's. They would quite happily take a much higher compression ratio, and they would even accept superchargers. I can well remember in the mid-60s racing a TC with a fiberglass body, a Buchanan body, which had a blower on it, a supercharger on it, which was capable of producing around about 100 miles an hour. Many TCs were modified with 16-inch wide rim wire wheels rather than the 19-inch almost bicycle wheels with which this car was fitted originally, and that certainly enhanced the road holding. Now, the car was very basic. In fact, in many ways it was similar to the old 28 Chev which we saw at the beginning of this segment, in that it had a pressed steel chassis frame with cross members which was extremely flexible. You could feel the chassis flexing on turns and bumps as you drove the car, but with its normal beam axle in the front and its live axle in the rear, because of the low centre of gravity and the relatively light weight of the car, it still came up with a remarkable degree of road holding, which could again be enhanced by more sophisticated shock absorbers, by changing the geometry and that sort of thing. As far as driving the TC is concerned, it really is the epitome of the English sports car, and just getting behind the wheel and moving off confirms the way in which the TC endeared itself to pretty well anybody who owned and drove one. The wind blows your hair. In fact, I have to apologise to the purist. I wasn't wearing a peak cap here, which I really should have been to be in complete character driving the TC. And the little car shows a remarkable willingness to move on out. It had a top speed of 78 miles per hour, 126 kph, and it used 9.42 litres of petrol per 100 kilometres, which worked out at 30 miles per gallon. So a car which sold for £600, about $1,200 new in 1947, which was the same price as the current FJ Holden model, and now, as far as this particular example is concerned, will quite happily bring around about $36,000. It gives you an idea of the way in which the value of vintage cars appreciates as the years go by. Now, stay with us. We'll be back right after this break, and we'll be back in future weeks with more presentations and road tests on vintage and collector motor cars.